A woman was shot and killed just minutes after posting about the domestic violence she was facing. Family members say 34-year-old Mariah Samuels lost her life this weekend to that violence.
Her family confirms the man in custody, David Wright, is an ex-boyfriend.
Today we are going to speak her name loudly.
The streets turn purple.
Because everybody should be protected when they are asking for help.
With Mariah Samuels' friends, family, and customers.
All right.
Picture this. You've done everything right. Filed the restraining order. Called the police. Documented every threat. You even posted on social media, begging for help just hours before dawn. And still, you end up lying on the pavement outside your own home, your life stolen by the very person the system promised to protect you from. That's exactly what happened to Mariah Samuels on September 14th, 2025, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She was just 34 years old when her ex-boyfriend fired 10 bullets into her body at 7:50 in the morning. 10 bullets. Not one. Not two. 10. But here's what makes this case so disturbing. It wasn't just one woman. Mariah was the fourth woman in her family to be murdered by someone who claimed to love her. The fourth. Let that sink in for a moment. For women from the same bloodline, all killed by intimate partners. How does that even happen in America in 2025? Before we go any further, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been commenting, sharing, and supporting True Crime Unraveled. We read every single comment you leave, and your insights help shape these stories. Keep them coming. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this case is going to challenge everything you think you know about domestic violence, restraining orders, and whether the system actually works when women cry for help. Now, let's talk about David Eugene Wright, the man who killed Mariah, because understanding him is key to understanding why she died. David Wright was 50 years old when he murdered Mariah. He'd just gotten out of prison after serving 15 years for illegal gun possession. 15 years. You'd think that kind of time would change a man, make him want to stay free at all costs. But with David, prison was just an intermission. He walked out in 2024 and immediately went back to what he knew best, hunting women. And I use that word deliberately. Hunting. Because that's what he did. He didn't just date women. He stalked them, controlled them, terrorized them. Before Mariah, there were at least 2 other women who'd gotten restraining orders against him. In 2020, one woman reported that David broke into her home while she was taking a bath, stole her wallet and keys, and when she got the protection order, he violated it within days. She wrote in her court filing that she was no longer the person she was before meeting him. That's what David did. He broke people. In 2022, another woman filed for protection, citing multiple break-ins and theft. The pattern was always the same. Charm them, isolate them, then unleash the violence when they tried to leave. But here's what should have sent him back to prison for life. David had a signature move. He used guns, not just to threaten, but to psychologically destroy his victims. Back in 2002, he pointed a gun at his girlfriend and her 15-year-old sister. The 911 recording captured the sister's terrified voice. "He pulled a gun on me and my little sister." That was over 20 years before he killed Mariah, and the pattern never changed. His criminal record reads like a horror show. 3 drug convictions, 2 aggravated robberies, property damage, check forgery, misdemeanor assault, identity theft, contempt of court, disorderly conduct. And yet, when Mariah met him in early 2025, she didn't know most of this. Or maybe she did and thought she could handle it. We'll never know for sure. What we do know is this. When David killed Mariah, he was on federal supervised release for that gun conviction. Supervised release. That means he was supposed to be monitored, checked on, held accountable. He wasn't supposed to have access to firearms. He wasn't supposed to be free to terrorize women. But somehow, he obtained another gun, stalked Mariah for weeks, and no one stopped him until after he'd emptied that magazine into her body. So ask yourself this. If a man with David's history can slip through every crack in the system, who exactly is the system protecting? Now let me tell you about Mariah Rosanna Samuels because she was so much more than a victim. She was a mother of 2 sons. One was 11, the other had just graduated high school. She worked as a pet groomer at Petco and ran her own dog grooming business on the side. Her neighbors, her extended family, everyone came to her because she had this gift with animals. 4 cats, 2 lizards, and a heart big enough to care for them all. Her friends described her as sweet, outgoing, free-spirited. She was the kind of person who'd give you the shirt off her back. She had just celebrated her 34th birthday in August 2025, surrounded by people who loved her. Life was good. Life was hers. Then David Wright entered the picture. They met in early 2025, and like most predators, David moved fast. The relationship was intense from the start. They posted photos together on social media, smiling, looking like any other couple. But if you look closely at those images, if you really study Mariah's face, you can see something's off. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. Her body language seems guarded, even when she's standing next to him. The relationship lasted just a few months, but in that time, David showed her exactly who he was. He became controlling, possessive, jealous. He started threatening her family. When he got angry, he'd slash her tires. And Mariah's family, they saw it happening. They tried to warn her. But by the time she realized how dangerous he really was, she was already trapped. Here's what so many people don't understand about domestic violence. Leaving is the most dangerous time. Statistically, women are at the highest risk of being killed when they're trying to leave or have just left an abusive relationship. Because that's when the abuser realizes they're losing control. And for men like David Wright, losing control is unacceptable. In late August, Mariah ended the relationship over the phone. Just a simple conversation. This isn't working. We're done. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? But for David, it was just the beginning. August 21st, 2025. The night Mariah tried to end things with David. She was dropping her son off at a friend's house when David called, said he was outside her home, claimed he had a gift for her. When she got back and went outside to tell him to leave, he showed her what the gift really was: violence. A doorbell camera captured what happened next. David pistol whipped her with his gun, hit her face and upper body repeatedly. When she tried to get away, he grabbed her throat and choked her while still holding the weapon. "I'll blow up this house," he told her. Her father was inside sleeping. Mariah passed out from the choking. When she came to, David was gone, but she had a knot on her head the size of a golf ball and bruises covering half her face. Now, this is where the system should have saved her. This was a felony assault with a deadly weapon. Automatic arrest in most states. David had a long criminal history. He was on supervised release. He'd just attacked her with a gun. This should have been a slam-dunk case. But Minneapolis police never forwarded the case for criminal prosecution. Their reason? Mariah initially said she didn't want to press charges. Let me explain something crucial here. It doesn't matter what the victim wants when someone uses a gun to assault another person. The state prosecutes regardless, especially when the perpetrator has a history like David's. They had photos of her injuries. They had her written statement. They had video evidence. They had witnesses who heard the threats. And they did nothing. So Mariah did what the system told her to do. 5 days after the assault, on August 26th, she went to Hennepin County District Court and petitioned for an emergency protection order, not just for herself, but for her 11-year-old son too. She documented everything. The assault, the threats, her fear that David would come back. She wrote, "I was extremely fearful of the respondent and take his threats seriously." The judge granted the order immediately. It was served to David on August 27th. He was barred from any contact with Mariah, couldn't come near her home, couldn't possess firearms. And you know what David did? He violated the order on social media, on camera, for everyone to see. And still, nothing happened. No arrest. No consequences. Just a piece of paper that meant absolutely nothing to a man who'd already decided how this story was going to end. The first 2 weeks of September 2025 were a living nightmare for Mariah. David was everywhere. Around the block, watching her house, following her movements. Mariah's family called the police multiple times. They filed reports. They begged for help. But what could the police do? David was being careful, staying just outside the legal boundaries while making his presence known. He was stalking her in broad daylight, and the system was powerless, or unwilling, to stop him. Mariah confided in her friend Connie Willis. "We're both making police reports, calling police," Connie later told reporters. But the calls didn't help. David kept coming back, kept circling, kept watching. Then came the early morning hours of September 14th. Around 4 a.m., Mariah woke up to find David outside her house again. He started sending her text messages, angry, accusatory, threatening. He couldn't accept that she'd moved on, that she was done with him. In his mind, she belonged to him, and her refusal to come back was an act of betrayal that required punishment. By 7:45 a.m., Mariah had had enough. She opened Facebook and typed out what would become her final post. She called him out publicly, called him a coward, said he couldn't control his emotions, that he'd threatened her family and damaged her car because he couldn't handle a breakup. She even mocked his 15 years in prison. Jail raised you. 15 years and not one certificate or any kind of education. Then she posted something that should have saved her life. Something that proved she was begging for help until her very last moments. "I was trying to stay silent, but he's stalking me at 4 in the morning, and the police ain't doing nothing, or did a thing besides serve him a protective order, and clearly it's not doing nothing." David was already outside as she made those posts. He'd been watching, waiting, planning. September 14th, 2025, 7:50 a.m. Russell Avenue North in Minneapolis. It was the kind of quiet Sunday morning where neighbors were sleeping in, coffee was brewing, kids were probably watching cartoons inside warm houses. Mariah walked out her front door heading toward her Jeep SUV. Maybe she was going to work. Maybe she was running an errand. It doesn't matter, because David Wright was waiting for her, and he'd already made his decision. He approached as she reached her vehicle. The forensic evidence later showed that Mariah probably saw him coming, recognized him immediately. Did she try to get in the car faster? Did she call for help? We'll never know, because David started shooting before she could react. The first bullet hit while she was still outside the vehicle. Then more shots as she tried to take cover behind the open driver's door. 15 shell casings would later be found scattered around the SUV. David didn't fire once or twice in anger. He emptied his magazine. This was an execution disguised as a domestic dispute. Witnesses saw what happened next, and it defies explanation. After the shooting stopped, David walked around to where Mariah lay bleeding in the street. He grabbed her arms and tried to drag her body back toward the SUV. Was he trying to stuff her in the car? Drive her somewhere else? Make it look like something other than what it was? But Mariah was dead weight. David couldn't move her by himself, so he gave up. Left her there in the street, one leg still hanging out of the SUV door. Then he did something so casual, so cold, that witnesses questioned what they were seeing. David walked to the back of Mariah's SUV and pulled out her bicycle. Not running, not panicking, just calmly taking her bike like he was borrowing it for a ride around the block. He climbed on and pedaled away down Russell Avenue, still carrying the gun he'd used to murder her. Think about that image. A 50-year-old man riding a dead woman's bicycle away from her bullet-riddled body while her children's mother lay dying on the pavement. Officers arrived at 7:53 a.m., 3 minutes after the first 911 call. But it was already over. Mariah Samuels was pronounced dead at the scene. Her Facebook post was still live. Her family and friends saw it. And when they couldn't reach her after seeing that post, they knew something was wrong. They rushed to check on her. But they were too late. The same post that was supposed to be her cry for help became her last words. Police had David's identity within hours thanks to surveillance cameras and witness descriptions. The next morning, September 15th, they found him in Anoka County, 20 miles north of Minneapolis. When they arrested him, David was calm, cooperative, no resistance whatsoever. At the station, detectives showed him photos of Mariah's body. His response chilled everyone in the room. "I'm not going to fight the situation. This is not going to be a hard-fought case." Then he said something that revealed the true depth of his delusion. "Read the text messages I sent her. Then you'll understand why I killed her." Not why I snapped. Not why I lost control. Why he killed her. Like murdering Mariah was a rational decision he'd carefully considered. David genuinely believed that Mariah's refusal to reconcile justified her murder. In his mind, she had forced him to kill her. She'd ended the relationship. She'd gotten a restraining order. She'd refused to take him back. She'd posted about him on social media. To David, these weren't her rights as a human being. They were acts of betrayal that required punishment. September 16th, David was formally charged with second-degree intentional murder and illegal possession of a firearm. Bond was set at $1 million. He didn't even try to make bail. At his first court appearance, David sat quietly while prosecutors read the charges. No emotion, no remorse, just listening like they were discussing someone else's crime. On September 20th, 2025, 6 days after Mariah's murder, nearly 200 people gathered at the shooting site on Russell Avenue. They wore purple, the color of domestic violence awareness. They carried signs. They held photos of Mariah. And they marched from that shooting site all the way to the Minneapolis 4th Precinct Police Station. Mariah's sister, Selena Owens, spoke, and her words cut straight to the heart of this tragedy. Today we are going to speak her name loudly. Mariah did everything she was supposed to do. She filed the order. She called the police. She documented the abuse. And she still died. If my sister, who did everything right, couldn't be protected by this system, then who can be? That question haunts everyone who hears it. Because Mariah did follow every rule society gave her. She reported the abuse. She got the restraining order. She cut off contact. She made a safety plan. She called for help. And none of it saved her. But here's what makes this case even more heartbreaking. Mariah wasn't the first woman in her family to die this way. She was the fourth. The fourth woman in her bloodline to be murdered by someone who claimed to love her. Her aunt stood in front of news cameras and said it out loud. For women in our family have been killed by men who said they loved them. For women, how does that happen? How does one family lose 4 women to intimate partner violence? What kind of generational trauma leads to that? And why didn't the system learn from the first 3 deaths to prevent the 4th? Mariah's aunt also revealed something crucial about the day Mariah died. She said that after Mariah was declared dead at the scene, the responding officer, the same officer who had initially helped her file the protection order, kept saying he was sorry. Multiple times, she said, "Sorry." As if that word could bring Mariah back. As if that word could explain why a woman who'd done everything right still ended up dead on her own doorstep. Let's talk about every point where the system failed Mariah, because understanding these failures is the only way to prevent the next murder. First, Minneapolis police refused to prosecute David for felony assault with a deadly weapon in August. He'd pistol whipped her, choked her, threatened to blow up her house. All on video, all documented. And they did nothing because Mariah initially said she didn't want to press charges. But that's not how felony assaults work. The state prosecutes regardless, especially when the perpetrator has a violent criminal history and is on supervised release. This was the first failure, and it was catastrophic. Second, federal probation failed to monitor a man on supervised release who clearly had access to firearms. David was serving supervised release for illegal gun possession. That means someone was supposed to be checking on him, making sure he wasn't violating the terms of his release. But somehow, David obtained another gun, stalked multiple women, and violated a restraining order repeatedly, and nobody noticed until Mariah was dead. Third, the courts issued a restraining order but provided no mechanism to enforce it when David violated it. He violated that order on social media, on camera for everyone to see. He sent Mariah threatening text messages. He stalked her house at 4 a.m. And there were no consequences. None. Because restraining orders are just pieces of paper, and paper doesn't stop bullets. Fourth, social services provided no follow-up after Mariah filed her protection order to ensure her safety plan was working. They helped her file the paperwork and then disappeared. No check-ins. No additional resources. No safety escorts. Nothing. Every single system designed to protect domestic violence victims abandoned Mariah when she needed them most. And here's the part that should terrify you. This wasn't an anomaly. This is how the system works, or doesn't work. David had threatened and assaulted multiple women over 2 decades. 2 restraining orders. Federal gun conviction. Pattern of escalating violence. Every red flag was documented. Every warning sign was there. Every agency had pieces of the puzzle. But nobody connected the dots until Mariah was dead. Information silos killed her. Police didn't talk to probation. Probation didn't monitor gun access. Courts issued orders, but couldn't enforce them. David fell through every crack in a system full of cracks. Mariah leaves behind 2 sons who will grow up without their mother. They're being raised by family members who love them, who are doing everything they can to keep Mariah's memory alive. To tell them stories about who their mother was. To show them photos and videos from before David Wright came into their lives. Her friend Connie Willis summed it up perfectly at the Memorial March. My friend was more than just a victim. She was a mother. She was a business owner. She was a daughter. She was a friend. She was a sister. Mariah had dreams. She had plans. She had a whole life ahead of her. And David took all of that away in less than a minute. The family set up a GoFundMe for Mariah's sons. Donations poured in from across the country. People who'd never met Mariah but understood that her death represents something bigger, a systemic failure that kills thousands of women every year. By late September, Mariah's case had become a rallying point for domestic violence awareness. Her name was being said alongside other victims. Her face was on posters at awareness events. Her story was being used to educate people about the warning signs, about what to do if you're in danger, about how the system is broken. Organizations like Violence Free Minnesota and the Black Femicide Project picked up her case, used it to push for legislative changes. Because Mariah's death wasn't unique. She was Minnesota's 17th confirmed intimate partner homicide of 2025, and it was only September. 17 women dead in 9 months. 17 families destroyed. And those are just the confirmed cases. So, what do we take away from Mariah Samuel's story? What lessons can we learn that might actually save lives? First, restraining orders don't stop bullets. They're legal documents, not force fields. If you're dealing with a dangerous ex, especially one with David Wright's history, you need more than paper. You need a comprehensive safety plan that doesn't depend on the system showing up when you call. Second, when someone shows you they're willing to use violence to control you, believe them the first time. Don't wait for escalation. Don't give them a second chance. Don't think you can change them. Get out. Get far away. Because leaving is dangerous, but staying can be deadly. Third, if someone in your life is dealing with a dangerous ex, don't just offer emotional support. Help them create practical escape plans. Help them relocate if necessary. Many domestic violence survivors say the best solution is to move to another city or state, far from their abuser. Starting over isn't easy, but it can save your life. Fourth, the system is broken. Profoundly, catastrophically broken. And until we fix it, until we connect those information silos, until we hold probation officers accountable, until we enforce restraining orders, until we prosecute felony assaults regardless of what the victim wants, more women will die begging to be believed. Mariah Samuels did everything right, and she still died. If that doesn't terrify you into action, I don't know what will. David Eugene Wright sits in a Hennepin County jail cell today, awaiting trial. He'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison. But that doesn't bring Mariah back. It doesn't give her sons their mother. It doesn't heal the generational trauma of a family that's buried 4 women to intimate partner violence. It doesn't fix a system that failed at every single point. Justice for Mariah means more than putting David Wright behind bars. It means changing the systems that allowed him to kill her in the first place. It means listening when women say they're in danger. It means enforcing the laws we already have. It means protecting victims instead of blaming them for not doing enough to save themselves. Rest in peace, Mariah Rosanna Samuels. Your life mattered. Your story matters. And your death will not be in vain. If you're watching this and you know someone dealing with an abusive relationship, share this video with them. To everyone who's been following True Crime Unraveled, thank you. Your comments, your shares, your support help us tell these stories. We read every single comment, and your insights matter. If this case moved you, if it made you think differently about domestic violence, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. And here's my question for you. Do you think the system can be fixed, or is it too broken to save? What would you change to prevent the next Mariah Samuels from dying? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation that might actually save lives. Next week, we're covering another case that exposes the cracks in our justice system. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay safe out there.